I think draw a grid here makes sense, but don't you think that if he had actually played knight takes h3, black really pushes that, right?
Black absolutely pushes that. There was an intermezzo with black's knight on f2 could have captured the h3 pawn with check. It would have been a 3-on-1. I think Hikaru sees it. He's shaking his head. Why is he shaking his head? I think he realizes there was a little mutual blunder there at the end of the game. But the fact remains, a draw in game one. What else could we have expected other than a sharp, even game, Amon? Of course, that's what we got.
And, of course, it wasn't just like, oh, yada, yada, let's trade all the pieces, make a draw. It's like, no, we actually saw Hikaru down to 10, 20 seconds. We saw a piece sacrifice. We saw 2 pieces for a rook. We saw a lot, and it ended up stalemate.
And I would caution people in the chat about making, conclusions on the basis of the first game. The players are still settling in. They're still testing each other's opening preparations. Even for Hikaru and Magnus, there is a period of adjustment where you have to settle the butterflies in your stomach. And I think they did a great job of doing that overall. I think we're going to see Hikaru playing a little bit faster in subsequent games. Although, as I say that, he is taking his time in this second game. Also, a Rui Lopez, this one a little bit different, but largely a similar structure.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting concept, Daniel. What would be your 30-second explanation for why you would bring a bishop out to develop in castle, and then castle and bring it literally back to the starting square? Like, how can you make that make sense?
I think what people need to understand is that open and closed positions operate very differently. This is still a closed center position, and as long as the center remains closed, the value of each individual tempo is greatly reduced. You can often afford to make more than one move with each piece, and that doesn't necessarily completely change the dynamic of the position. Black is still very fundamentally sound, and there's the answer to our question, Amon. G6 by Magnus, redeploying the bishop on G7. Why? In order to protect the king and to exert long-term pressure on white's d4 pawn.
And Naka's with the black pieces here, unless I have it backwards, just confirming.
No, he does have black.
Okay, just making sure. But bishop to G7, and it looks like we're going to see this knight G3. Maybe just a slow-moving game. You know what's interesting is this is the same structure as a King's Indian, but it's vastly different in the sense that rook e8, you're not playing f5 and going for that,
arrangement of pieces. It seems to me like Magnus holds the advantage in this game. He has more space, he's got better control of key central squares, and the opening that this structure reminds me of is a Benoni, right? That pawn on c5, White's pawn on d5, and in a Benoni, the engine often evaluates it in White's favor, but in practice, it's actually very, very difficult to make concrete progress, and Magnus says, I'm tired of the KG play, I'm going to go e5, and I'm going to run you over in the center.
Totally, and there's an idea which I barely even get to talk about before I believe it's on the board right now. I almost want to award this a double exclamation mark just because of how thematic it is, Daniel. Pawn takes, and then White continues pawn to f5, and all those black pieces that want to use the e5 square are looking at the pawn and saying, come on, dude, move out of the way.
And it does move out of the way, but he rips the band-aid off, but he invites White's knight into the center, and that's the problem. After knight takes e4, f6 is threatened, d6 is threatened, the g6 pawn is weak as well. Hikaru's position is suddenly on the verge of collapse. Amon, I call that technique the square clearer. It's where you push your pawn up and vacate the square left behind in order to put a knight on that square. Black's position is in dire straits.
And we are all wondering how you came up with that great name.
I'm known for my originality, but that's why
Shocker.
they pay me the big bucks to commentate the SEC finals.
And after e4, we essentially have the same position, except the d6 pawn is missing. Because if White had played f5 first, there would have been a pawn on e4, pawn on d6. White's position is so much better with these moves included. Rook e8 and tactics everywhere. Rook takes e4 is the threat right now.
Yeah, and the move f6, which probably tempts a lot of people watching this show right now, I think it fails tactically. Black can take on f6, and after the trade, the e3 bishop is going to hang. It's actually a pretty easy line to visualize. If you look at that e3 bishop, that bishop would love to be anywhere but there, and that's why bishop g5 here has to be seriously considered by Magnus, but it can't be met with the move f6. So yes, the eval bar giving a big advantage, but in practice, a very hard position to navigate accurately. The bishop slides up to f4 instead of g5.
Yeah, and, the double question mark is showing up there, Daniel, but it's almost a double question mark because you could have done better, not because bishop f4 itself was so bad. Bishop
Blunder,
a6.
rook e7! Oh, Hikaru forgot.
My goodness.
Hikaru forgot that rook takes e8 is going to pin the queen. He drops a minor piece.
At first, I was like, wait a minute, bishop a6, is he forgetting there's a queen on f1? But then it was a step further than that. He knew the queen was there, but Magnus, rook takes e7 and rook takes e8. He is going to pull away with a victory here, especially with 10 seconds left on the clock for Hikaru after this blunder.
And he resigns because a6